morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. We're not going to be teaching out of the book this morning. I hope that's okay with everyone. If you got your Bibles, if you'll turn to John chapter 12, we're going to read verses 1 through 12. I was putting this lesson together, and I was praying about it, and I feel like we got something this morning that the Lord's been dealing with me about, and hopefully this will be something for y'all and help y'all, encourage y'all along the way. And this morning's title that I've come up with is called Breaking Your Box or Selling Your Experience. So in John chapter 12 and verse 1 it states, "Then Jesus 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, when Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with them. Then took Mary a pound of ointment and spikenard, very costly ointment, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with an odor of the ointment. Then saith one disciple, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him, Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the bag, and bare what was put in therein. Then said Jesus, Let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor is always ye have with you, but ye have not always. Much people of the Jews therefore knew that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death, because that by of him many Jews went away and believed on Jesus. On the next day, much people that were come to the feast when they had heard Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So to give you a little timeline, a lot of us has read the story, and we understand what's going on here. We're at the house of Simon the leper, and who's all in the room? We got Simon the leper, Jesus, Judas, the rest of the disciples, Mary, Martha, Lazarus. So at this moment, this is right before the Passover is coming to pass, before they did the palms, and so we're almost right there at the time they're fixing to do the crucifixion, but we're not quite there yet. There's a lot of things that's going on in this, and if you read over very quickly in the Gospels, we just skip over this, that this was just a pin in the time mark of Jesus and where Judas would betray him. But let's break it down a little bit and understand what's going on. So who was Simon the leper? It's Mary and Martha and Lazarus' father, if we go back and do some research. So we have, like I said, him and Jesus, Judas and the other 12 disciples, and then Mary, and Martha's in the kitchen getting everything ready, and then there's Lazarus. So let's start off with this. What's spikenard? It's a very expensive perfume or ointment. It has a very distinct aroma. So when you break it or you smell it, you know exactly what it is. It's not questionable what it is. When you smell it, you absolutely know exactly what it is. It's so a unique smell that you can smell it wherever you're at. It's not like you have a confusing thought about it. So, how much did this cost? Well, it would cost Mary in this time frame a year of her wages. So if she worked every day for a year, it would cost her exactly 1 year to get that. Then they would have to buy it from northern India, which is around 6,700 miles from Jerusalem. So that's a lot. I mean, back then they didn't have cars and planes, so you just couldn't call Amazon and be here next day delivery. It didn't happen like that. So they would have to do camel trains. So it'd take a camel 80 to 100 miles a day to travel the distance. So roughly that would be about 3 months to arrive. So you're thinking about this lady has bought this ointment, and I can just picture it. I'm a little slow this morning, but I want you to understand the scenery of where we're at in this room. Put yourself in this room. Pull up a table and enjoy the room. So we're in this room, and some people have a mantle on top of their mantle, and they have stuff that's there and it's important to them. Some people hang deer over the mantle. Some people put their trophies. Some people put things like that over the mantle that's something special to them. Well, this ointment in my mind is sitting over the mantelpiece. It's in a marble shell, is what it said. An alabaster box is a marble shell that's holding, and it's sitting there, and it's something priceful. I can just imagine Brother Tony walking in like, "Hey, well, how's it going?" And Martha or Mary's over here. "Yeah, have you heard about my alabaster box? I've waited 3 months for it to get here. It finally got here. It took me over a year to get saved up enough money, or an inheritance she got, that I got enough that I could get my ointment. I haven't tried it out yet. I haven't opened and smelled it. Maybe we can do it later. Maybe we can just take a smell of it. Maybe we can just get a whiff of it to understand how precious it is. And we're sitting there, and then you have Martha's in the kitchen. She's getting something ready. She's got, all these guests in her house, and she's trying to cook biscuits or cornbread or, fried chicken. She's in there just weaving it out. She's in there baking. She's concentrating on where she's at and what she's doing. All of a sudden you hear, Mary, where are you at? Mary, I'm in here, I'm working. She walks in the living room, and Mary's beside her ointment. Where's Lazarus? Lazarus is probably talking to one of the disciples saying, man, she just got raised from the dead not long before this. And he's explaining to him how marvelous Jesus really is, and getting there and talking to him and telling him how great and wonderful. How we do not have any recollection of what Lazarus saw on the other side. There's nothing documented. Maybe he's saying, maybe he saw the streets of gold. Who knows? Maybe he's telling them what he saw, what he experienced, what he's been going through, just having casual conversation. And Jesus is sitting there in the middle of this, and I can just, in my mind, Martha's calling, Mary, I need you. The biscuits are almost done. I need you to help them get out of the oven. We need to set the table. We need to get it ready. We have many people. And all of a sudden you hear something crash. So what do? As I think everything went silent. We have chaos in the room, and all of a sudden everything's going on, and it just goes silent. The alabaster box is broken, and all of a sudden Mary's at the feet of Jesus. She's wiping it and cleaning it with her hair. She's in there and she's working and sacrificing this to the Lamb of God. And all of a sudden, you get a comment made from Judas. Wouldn't you know that we could sell this for 300 pence? Don't you know that how much is that worth? In our day in technology, in our day in money system, that box of ointment was worth $55,000. Some of us have these things we want. Some people want a new truck or a new boat or a new house. And you think about $55,000. The average American only makes $52,000 a year. You think about saving that and having that, and all of a sudden, it's gone. Everything you worked for that year, everything you worked for many years, is gone. It's just in Judas's eye, you just threw it away. You just gave it away. Why did you do that? And other disciples are questioning, if I'd have had $55,000, I would have done this with it. If I'd have had 300 pence, I would have spent it on this. I would have never done this. I would have never busted the box at Jesus' feet. But they didn't realize who he was in the fullness of who he was. So let's get their point of views is that Mary, in that point, it was nothing but worship. It was nothing but just getting in the moment of Jesus. And at that moment, the alabaster box breaks and the aroma fills the room. And when the box breaks, everything stops. The chaos, the conversation. I just imagine, if you go in a restaurant and a glass breaks or a plate breaks, all of a sudden you say, oh, what's going on in there? Something happened. Your conversation stops. You can be talking about anything you want to and a plate breaks. Or you're a mother or a father and you're going there and you have a child and they break something. All of a sudden you go and see finds out what it was. Everything changes. The mood changes. You go from doing your regular to a mood change. So what happens? At that moment, it doesn't matter that Martha was slaving in the kitchen or that Lazarus, Simon, and Jesus was carrying on a conversation. It doesn't matter that the chaos and the conversation started and that the confusion was going on. At that moment, the aroma filled the room. At that moment when the box broke, there was an aroma that filled the room. At that moment, there was something that was different about Mary than there was anybody else in the room. And it wouldn't just affect her, but it affected everyone in the room. In that sense, when you break your box, when you get in that, when you break it, that aroma of, if it's spikenard, it changes the atmosphere. It gets somebody's attention. You don't leave the same way you came. Sometimes when you break something, you get a fragrance, it gets on you a little bit. You can smell it. If you go make a fire, you're going to smell like smoke. It doesn't matter if you sit close to it or you're far from it, you're going to smell like smoke. And somebody's going to ask you, have you been around a fire? Have you been around a fire pit? And you have to say yes, because you smell like it. So imagine this. They smell like spikenard. Something that everyone has always wanted to be part of, but some of them's never had the opportunity to smell it. They don't exactly know exactly what it smells, but everyone smells like it now. But before we get into that, let's tell the difference between Mary and Judas. In Mark 14:4 it states, and then there were some that had indignation with themselves, and they say, why you waste the ointment made? For it might be sold for 300 pence and be given to the poor. And they murmured against her. In Mark 14:10 and 11, it says that Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went unto the chief priests and betrayed him unto them. And then they heard it, and they were glad, and promised to him money, and he sought how he might conveniently betray him. So the difference in this is that Judas went and got the experience and got it on his garment and went about this, and he wasn't changed the same way Mary was changed. He didn't understand the aroma in the room. Instead, he said, she just robbed, the poor of $55,000. He didn't see the importance of that. He didn't see the sacrifice in the Son of God. And it stood out to me in verse 11, he said, he might conveniently betray him. And when I was researching this and looking at it, a thought came to my mind, and this is just a short thought. Are you being a convenient Christian? Are you being convenient? Are you conveniently just following Jesus when you like it? Are you just conveniently, are you just there when it's okay? Are you there just because it's Sunday morning? Are we just there because it's Sunday school? Are we just there because it's Wednesday night prayer meeting? Are you just there because it's a group of other Christians and you feel like it's the way you're supposed to be? Is it there because you're in trouble in the hospital and you want prayer? Are you conveniently a Christian in that moment? Because Judas in this moment had followed Jesus. He was one of the disciples. He was one of the chosen few that had been chosen. But it says here he might conveniently betray him. That doesn't mean that he had to work out of his way. That didn't mean he had to move mountains or move boulders to get in there to betray Jesus. It was convenient to him. When you think of convenient, you go to somewhere like Chick-fil-A. It's convenient to go get a chicken sandwich or go through the meal. It's convenient. It's quick. It's just there. And that's how Judas was with Jesus. It was convenient to betray him. It was convenient in that sense to sell him for 30 pieces of silver. Convenient in the definition of the Webster Dictionary means to be fitting and well with people's needs, activities, and plans. Are you convenient in your walk? Or you only want to serve him when it meets your needs, not when it meets the needs of what Christ wants you to do? Is it hard for you to serve Jesus when it's convenient? Is it hard for you to serve him when it's not? It's hard to be a Christian if you don't love him. It's easy to have religion, but it's hard to be a Christian if you don't love him. We serve him because of who he is and what he does. We don't serve him just because we don't want to go to hell. That is a pro of being a Christian, that we get saved from the hell. But when you really grasp a hold of who Jesus is, that's when we serve him. You won't have a problem serving Jesus Christ if you fall in love with the man that hung on the cross. If you really see who he is and understand that that is the reason why we are here, it's not convenient. We give him our all, like Mary did with the box, alabaster box. You give him your everything. Your most prized possession. Maybe it's your life goals. Maybe it's your salary. Maybe it's that next job. Maybe it's the family you thought you had. All your plans and goals, you give it to him. But not because it's convenient. Judas took the convenient way out of it. So Judas felt that the need to tell him the ointment was 300 pence, but then he sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver, if you do research, like I said, and take money in consideration, is only a tenth of what the actual alabaster box cost. So Judas sold Jesus for a tenth of what Mary put on the feet of Jesus. So she didn't waste a year of her life working. She was preparing an ointment and a sacrifice to give to Christ. Maybe she worked long hours and she waited that long period of time, but at that moment the blessing was worth the long toil and the long hardships and the long waiting for that anticipation of something that was going to happen. But it didn't take Judas but just one visit in the room of filling the ointment that, I'm done with this. I can make 30 pieces of silver. I can make a tenth of that. I can just take what is mine and go and sell him. It never said that the chief priest came to Judas and said, will you sell him? They didn't go, will you please sell him? Like, we need him. No, Judas went out of the building. It never states anywhere after that in Mark's gospel that he went anywhere else to talk to anybody about this. He went straight to the chief priest and told them, what can you give me to give him Jesus? He sold his experience for 30 pieces of silver because he was not willing to see the miracle in the breaking of the box. So he only gives them for 10 or a tenth of that. And in that moment when she broke the box, nothing else mattered to her. It didn't matter if she spent that money, but at that moment Judas realized he can make a profit off the blessing. In Matthew 14 and 24, it talks about Peter walking on the water. And it says, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrary. In the fourth watch in the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him and walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit, and they cried out with fear. But straightway Jesus spoke unto him, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid thee come on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to Jesus. And when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and began to sink, and he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said to him, O thou of little faith, where'st thou doubt? And when they come into the ship, the wind ceased. And when the ship came, they worshipped him, saying, O thou art the Son of God. Peter broke his box. Peter experienced something that no other disciple was able to do. He got to walk on water. Because of faith, he broke his box. He got out of his comfort zone. He got out of a place that he knew was convenient. You know, we come to church and we get in conveniency. That we, not saying that you walked away from God, you just go in your everyday routine. You know, Monday through Friday you go to work, Saturday you do a little yard work during the summer, and Sunday we're at church. That's what you do. And we come in here, Brother Mark says it many times, we're going to sing 3 songs, he's going to preach 30 minutes, we're going to take a 5-minute prayer, and we're going to go home and eat. So the question is when you break that box of the understandable or the thing you do in a routine, what happens? And Mary's aspect, it changed the aroma of the room. That's what happens when you come to church services and you break your own box. It doesn't affect just me. If I break my box, it may affect Brother Tony or Sister Connie in a different way. It goes to every point of the room, that it goes to every corner, every crack, every crevice. And you think about it, that aroma that fills the room is something you've never experienced before in the point that it's so pure. Isn't that how the Spirit of God is when we come in and you get in and you say, you know, I've worked all week, I'm in the trial of my life. And this is where Peter was at. He was in a storm. He was in a place, and I can just picture all the rest of the disciples that they put on their life jackets and they're sitting there like, we're going to die. Like, we're in the middle of this storm. Like, I don't know where I'm going to turn. I've looked. I've tried to figure this out. I don't know what else to do. And Peter says, you know what? I'm going to take my box and I'm going to break it. I'm going to walk out on the water because it's not easy to do that. You defy the nature of gravity. I've gone out there and I've done everything I needed to do. And here I am walking on the water. And then he's afraid. And the waves are contrary, and he gets worried, and his faith goes around. And we know the story. He goes back to the boat. But then I read this, and it struck out to me. It says, and then they came back to the ship, and they worshipped him. Worship is something that you don't do because it's something we just feel like, you know, I've had a good week. I'm just going to stand up here. I'm going to worship God. It means that even in the storms of your life, you worship him. It means when the room is crowded and everything's going on and you got 1,000 things to do, you still worship him. When the world outside us, we don't understand what's going on, and it's chaos, we still worship him. We don't worship him because we feel like it. We worship him because of who he is and what he's going to do and what he's already done. So you think about it, as in the storm, he was contrary. He didn't know what else to do. But he made a decision, and that's how Mary was. She made a decision. She made a decision that at that moment she was going to break the box and everything would change. Peter, at that decision, he made a decision that he was going to walk on the water and have faith. And he received a blessing just as Mary received a blessing. And it was a personal blessing. But everyone around them knew they had got a blessing. So the next story I'm going to read is Samson. It's in Judges 16 through 21 through 25. I know it's a lot of reading. I'm trying to bring this all together so you realize where we're at. In a few minutes, it's 20 minutes after 9, in about 20 more minutes, 25 more minutes, we're going to go to a place of worship. And I want you to understand where we're at, what we're going to be going through. And maybe you'll break your box. Samson in Judges 16, 21 through 25 states, But the Philistines took him and plucked out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass. And he did grind in the prison house. Howbeit the hair on his head began to groweth, and again after he is shaven. And the lords of Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god, and rejoiced, and they said, Our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, Our God hath delivered us in the hands, our enemy, and a destroyer of our country, which sleweth many of us. It's a sad part of the story of Samson. He was a great and victorious leader. He fought and killed many Philistines. He was a great warrior, was well known. Sometimes that's how we are. Some of us have great names in the community. Some of us have great names in the association and great names throughout the country. But there comes a point where there was a decision made. There was something that was so small that it changed the course of his life forever. He got distracted. So if you do research in the archery field and you miss it, you miss your mark, it's called sin. That's what the terminology is sin. So if you miss it by a little bit at the beginning, it shows a great difference at the end. And it's called sin. Same way with a book. Same way with a Bible. If you miss it by just a little bit, it's sin. That's where Samson's in this point. He missed it by just a little bit. He had the blessing. He had the promise. He had everything that he needed. Just as Mary had the box. She had everything she needed. She had the promise. She had the goods. But Samson, he chose to give it away. He chose to give it, as I can say, to the Philistines. And just give it away for what? For a piece of their world? For a piece of their society? For fame? For just to be announced who he was? Just to be with Delilah? I mean, why did he sell it? What was so great in that moment that he just decided to sell his experience for everything? There's been times in my life and times I'm sure in your life that you got a decision. And it may not be much. It may be just somebody giving to this. It won't take much. Or have that kind of attitude against them. They hurt you. It's okay to be bitter against them. It's okay to talk behind their back. It may be the truth, but that's still gossip. When we get to that point, what does it take to skew you away from where you're at to get your blessing? That you just sold your experience completely. I believe Samson walked in there, and in the moment he saw Delilah, it was not the fact of, I'm here, and she's a beautiful woman, and I'm just going to sell everything God has given me to be with her. That was not his intention. And as Christians, that's not our intention of when we walk out in this world. Maybe it's a job, and they come in, and they say, I want you to work on Sundays. I'm not saying sometimes that's what you got to do. But when Sunday just becomes an ordinary day, and you don't reverence it, it's just a tack on the wall. Saying it's that timeline that I'm just going to give up this little bit of my life, and I'm just going to give up this little part of it, and it's going to be okay. Well, then I'm not going to prayer meeting on Wednesday nights anymore because I worked all week, and I hadn't been in a couple months, and I'm not doing that no more. I'm put it on the wall. It's just a tack. And that trail starts, and somebody says something that hurt my feelings, and I say, I'm not going to sit on this side of church. I'm going to sit on this side of church. It happens. That's real. I'm not saying anything we haven't heard before. This is something that happens not just in our churches, but churches around the country that they church shop. They get it to what they want. They want something that they wait on that thing that they think is going to be pure and wonderful. But there's only one thing that's pure and wonderful, and that's the Son of God. So if you wait on the Lord, He'll help you. He'll get you to the right place. But what I'm talking about here is that when you get to this point, you get these little pins in your life where I'm going to sell out. It's not all at once. It's not all that I'm just going to turn my back on God. I'm going to walk another way. I'm just going to denounce Him. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a pin drop in your walk of life. That's where Samson was. He defeated the Philistines. He killed them. He murdered people that was on their side. But he walked into their house and said, here I am. He just handed over his blessing because he was convinced that he could just sell it out. And they say here, and sacrifice unto Dagon their God. There's things in this world that we may not classify as that it's something big. But in a few years, if you just think about it, it's going to become your God. There's nothing wrong with fishing. There's nothing wrong with hunting. There's nothing wrong about making money. There's nothing wrong about driving a fancy car, living in a big house, or going and traveling. But when that becomes your God, there's something wrong with it. Amen. When it becomes something that gets in your way of worship, is there something wrong with it? I'm just talking to y'all this morning. We're just friends and family in here. This is something the Lord dealt with me putting this together that I felt like I needed to tell y'all. Because it dealt with me as much as I hope it's dealing with y'all. Because it may not mean much to you right now, that box sitting on that mantle, but when Jesus walks in, it changes the room. It changes. When you're a crowd that you're around, it changes how you deal with that alabaster box. Maybe she hid it when somebody came by and it was a thief or something. She may have put it away, didn't want to talk about it as much. Maybe she didn't speak about it as much. But when Jesus came up, it changed the whole way she looked at it. And that's how we are today. When you get in that point where you see that something may be more important to you than what God is, it's a problem. You need to bust it. You need to get out of that. You need to break that. And that's where we're at. Is that maybe she looked at it. We don't have any documentation. I'm just going off how, if I'm sitting in the room, like I told y'all to do, bring up your chair and sit. Is that a God to her? Is that something bigger and mightier than Jesus in your life? Is that something that you prize more than anything else? That's where Samson was in this moment. He wanted to be with Delilah more than anything else in this world. And he sold his experience. But that's not the end of Samson. In Judges 16 and 29 it says, "And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord, remember me. I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, once, only this once, O God, that I may be once avenged by the Philistines for my 2 eyes." At that moment, Samson knew that all he could do was cry out. At that moment, he knew of repentance, that he needed to break his box. He needed to get out of his comfort zone. How many times have we been in church and there's been issues in our life that we may not want to call it sin, or we just failed, we messed up. Maybe we just want to mark it as something else, but you're not where you need to be. You're in the rut of religion. You're in a place of consistency that you have not moved in Christ. You were the same place you were a year ago. You were the same place you were 5 years ago. You're in that place where you have to break it, but we sit in our pews and we don't realize where we're at, and we won't break our box to get what we need. At this moment, Samson knew what he needed. He needed to come to an altar, repent, and say, Lord, I've been consistent. I've been complacent in what I need. I have not eaten of the fruit. I have not been what you needed me to be. I have sat in the house. Maybe I'm not partaking in the things of this world and society inputs. Maybe I'm not part of this culture. Maybe I'm still standing strong on this, and this, but you kind of back down on this quality in your life. And you accepted friends that you don't need in your life and put bad influence, and eventually that's going to ruin you. And you're in that point where he realizes that before all, he said, I've lost everything. I've lost my eyes. I've lost my strength. He's lost his power. How many times do we come down to an altar and we get a blessing, we go back and we're renewed, and we get that moment in our life where we're just like, we can change the world. And you get saved. I remember, I've heard others say this, that I'm going to save the world. I'm going to be the biggest disciple that Jesus ever had. I'm going to tell him just how much I love him, how much he's wonderful in my life. And then it goes away. You have to break your boxes in your life to realize where you're at. And yes, it's going to make a mess, but it's better to break them now than have the result in the future. Because as we looked already, Mary broke her box, but Judas sold his experience. The last place I'm going to talk about today and bringing the stories together is Paul and Silas in the prison. In Acts 16:25 through 26, it talks about a great breaking by being broken. It says, at midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang the praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and every bond was loosened. In the middle of Paul and Silas' moment in their life, they broke their box and started worship. They could have just said, we're in the prison, it's dark, it's scary, it's cold, it's wet. I don't feel like worshiping. But he had gotten the mindset at midnight, when it's the darkest of every time that you get there. And points in the Bible, midnight is pointed out that it's the most darkest time in their lives. They use that as a prelude of what's going on. It's at their darkest time that they broke out of their box and started worshiping. They got out of their comfort zone. They got out of their spiritual box. But this is how we've always done it. I've always went to this point and it's always worked, but now it's not working now. It's not comfortable to serve the Lord at this point in their life. But then all of a sudden, the earthquake came, the foundations of it. Things started moving. Doors started opening. Chains started being broken. I'm glad that we still worship, a chain-breaking, ground-shaking God. I'm glad that we still can break our boxes, that he can shake our point where we're at in our lives, and he can see where we're at, and he knows where we're at. Even though we may not see where we're at, he can shake us up a little bit that we get in the instance that we want to break out of this. Maybe there's some chains like I was talking about earlier that it's got a little tighter. You picked up a little things that you went on, got a little bit of weights on you. It may not seem like much today, but when you go through that trial in your life, they're going to get a little heavy on you. You're going to be able to walk through the valley and climb the mountains like you used to. I was over in Utah, and we were climbing a mountain, and we think this is kind of funny in my house. I'm told to so many people. We were hiking up this mountain, and it got kind of hot and got kind of heavy, and all I had to carry was my water bottle. It got heavy to me. I still carried it. But if I'd carried more with me, that struggle would have been more than what I could have bared. It was hot. It was hard. But we made it. And when we got up there, it was worth the view. But if I'd have carried more than what I had anticipated, I may not have made the journey. It may not be through the trial that you're going through right now that those weights bother you. But it might be the trial that makes the decision. Are you conveniently a Christian? Or are you a sold-out Christian? That those weights bother you. It may not be when you're going in the supermarket and you may know all the verses in the Bible that you want to, you run through it. You know how to hand out tracts. You know how to write up a sermon. You know how to sway people with your words. You know how to win them over. And you can do all these things because we've done them. We've been in the places where we haven't been on fire for God and we still talk about Him. Well, you get to that point. But the thing is that when do you break your box? When is it not just an everyday thing when you get up in the morning and you're like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to look at it and see what, the possibilities that it may give. Maybe one day I'll get to use that. Maybe we're going to go somewhere and I can sacrifice something. And maybe it's just be something that I just can't understand. That's just something I'm waiting on that day. Why not today? Why not today? She didn't just take a little bit and dribble it on his feet. She took the whole box and busted it. She took everything she had and gave it all. Would it make a difference in your life if you just said, Lord, I'm going to give you everything I got? And be in that mindset every day when we get up, I gave everything I got. I don't think Mary got in the next day and she was standing there and she got in her living room. Like, let's just put it into now. She's sitting on her couch and she's looking up her mantelpiece and she goes, man, I sure miss that ointment. I sure miss having that beautiful vase sitting up there. Man, I don't have nothing to talk about anymore, I feel like. Isn't that how the devil is when he comes in after you get a blessing? Or he's helped you through that trial and that tribulation and that place you've been at. And you get there and say, Lord, like, I don't feel like I'm where I need to be. I wish I had that back. But then all of a sudden she started thinking about when I busted that box, I got to get at the feet of Jesus. It didn't say she poured it over his head and anointed his hand. No, she went at his feet. Humility, humbleness, of realizing that he was much greater than she was. When we get in a place where we can realize how big God really is, that he can change the whole world, it would change your perspective that we have to kneel in front of God. We have to realize that we walk to him in humility. There's some times in my life where, I'm just being transparent with you. There's some times that pride may get in the way. There may be some times that hurt feelings will get in the way. There's some times when disappointment gets in the way. There's sometimes when the goal that you've prayed about and you've hoped this will happen doesn't work out. It just doesn't. Not because it wasn't God's plan. It's just the fact he was grooming you into the place where you can be today. Where you can be somebody that God can use and get you to that place that maybe it takes a year and 3 months to get that blessing and to that moment when Jesus walks into the room with you. Sometimes you go through places and it's dry and it's hot and you worry about how you're going to make it. It's just a timeline for God to get you where you need to be. So, when you start to realize that nothing else matters, that's when you realize that all thing that does matter is him and worship. When you realize that it doesn't only just affect you and the way that you live, but it affects your family. For Tony and Sister Anna, you got 2 sons that preach the gospel. When you break your box, it doesn't just affect you two, but it affects their ministry also. When I break my box, and it doesn't just affect me, but it affects my family, who people I come in contact with. When you think about it, it makes an impression. It makes a difference in everyone's life. When Mary broke the box, her aroma filled the room. It didn't just go on the feet of Jesus. It didn't just go on the floor. But it went all the way to the ceiling, all the way to the walls, and to the door jamb. I was thinking about this, and if you read in there, it says that there was a multitude waiting for them outside because they were there to see Lazarus. They were there to see him because he'd been raised from the dead. Nobody's ever seen that before. They've never been part of that. So they're ready to see Lazarus and Jesus. So what happens? My question is to you, what happened when they opened the door? It didn't just affect the people in the building. When you break your box, it doesn't just affect the people in this room. It'll venture on outside so it affects somebody else. Maybe there was somebody that was out there that never smelled this ointment, this perfume, never knew what it smelled like. But the moment they opened the door to leave, to go out, because if you read the rest of the story, they're fixing to go to Palm Sunday, and that's where they're at in this timeline. But they said that people fell in love with Jesus at that moment after that encounter. Was it the aroma? Was it the Spirit? Was it something that was different about that encounter? Maybe. We don't know. There's not any documentation. But I like to believe that it doesn't matter, and we got proof in the Bible that it doesn't matter how you come in contact with Jesus, your life will never be the same. It doesn't matter how the aroma hits you. Your life will never be the same. There's always a decision to make. There's always something that you'll have to contemplate. There's always a choice that you're going to have to make. Is it either are you going to embrace the aroma and be in it, or are you going to sell your experience? Because it's just as easy to walk out the door and say, I'm done with this. It's hard. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of this. I'm not accepted in society. Nobody wants me to be a Christian anymore. At work they don't want me to be a Christian. My people around me don't want. Nobody's downing. And Judas, as an example, sold his experience for 30 pieces of silver. So around $5,000, he sold his experience. He sold his chance to go to heaven. He sold his chance to be something great in the kingdom of God. He sold all that because he was jealous of a woman that took everything she had and broke it at the feet of Jesus. But the story doesn't end at Palm Sunday, but it ends with a man that resurrected from the dead, because his bones were broken, but so you can break your box. So you have the choice to break your box. So you have the choice to react or not to react. It's your choice. The difference between us and angels is that we have our own will that we can worship him. If he wanted you to worship and you didn't have a will, he'd have made you an angel. He would have. He has the power and the ability to do that. But this morning you had the ability. We're already dressed up. We're already here. We're already in the routine. It's 9:40. I got 5 more minutes before Sunday school's out. But where's your mindset at? Do you have your box in front of you? If I handed a box and handed it out to everyone this morning, do you have it in front of you, and what's it full of? Is it full of yourself? Is it full of pride? Is it full of bitterness? What is it full of? Is it halfway full? Is it all the way full? I mean, that's a whole nother teaching for another day, and we can talk on that later. But where are you at? This got on me last night when I was finishing up these notes. Where am I at? Am I out of my comfort zone? I'm not saying that you got to pick up one of these flags and run around the church or go out and street preach and just yell at people. I'm not saying, dudes, you ain't got to do all that. You ain't got to go out here and move to a deserted island and try to win soul. You don't have to do any of that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, when is it time that you got out of your comfort zone and saying, Lord, I'm tired of where I'm at. I'm tired of just sitting here, sit back, relax, looking at my ointment and wondering when I'm going to be able to use it. I'm tired of sitting here wondering, when am I going to be able to put forth where I've saved and harvested and worked and did all these things. Many times I can imagine that Mary was like, I've worked hard. I've got to this point where I want to use this ointment, but it's just not there yet. Maybe that she was going to use it for a sacrifice, but the perfect sacrifice hadn't come until this point. But little did she know that was going to be the only sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, the one that gave it all. That she said, I'm okay with this. I'm not going to be conveniently I'm not going to just go back in there and help Martha get the biscuits ready. I'm not going to sit around and just listen to conversation and talk about my days and what we're going to do and how we're going to do this. But I'm going to break up the chaos, break my box, get out of my comfort zone and get a blessing. Because it didn't just affect Mary. It affected her family. It affected the disciples. Because if you read in there in the first part, it talked about how they were all in discussion about why did she break it. Even the disciples didn't understand the ultimate sacrifice that Mary just made. And they followed Jesus. You can be serving him for 30, 40 years, 50 years, and been in this place where you feel like I've got everything I need. I got it right. I've done it right. I've said all the right things. But are you still holding on to that ointment this morning? Are you still holding on to that thing that you hold so cherished that when you pass, when you die, it's not going to go with you? When Mary, eventually when she went on life, if she'd have kept it, it would have not went with her. It would have not. It would have not went on to heaven, and it would not meant anything then. It would just been an ointment in a box. So maybe you've been serving, like I was saying, for 20, 30, 40 years, and you've got everything right. You got it down to a T. No one knows what's going on in your life, and you think that, I got it. The pastor ain't figured it out. But Mark ain't done his research. I got it. But Tony and the deacons ain't figured it out. It ain't for them to figure out. All seeing eye sees everything you do. Amen. He watches everything you do. And he sees what you have in your box. He sees how precious that box is to you. And maybe you're sitting here and you're like, Lord, I've given you everything. I have. I've given you my goals. I'll go to church. I give you my free time. I'll give you this. I give you that. But maybe there's that little thing on here that he wants you to do. Maybe He wanted you to teach Sunday school. Maybe He wanted you to be a preacher. Maybe you want to be a singer. Maybe you want to just witness to that one person at work, and you're, Lord, I don't want to do that. I'm going to put it up there on my mantle, and I'm going to come back and look at it every day. But one of these days, you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to break that box to get your blessing. You're going to have to realize that the most precious thing that you have in this life, you got to get rid of it to realize that who He is. Because like I said, Mary realized at that moment that it didn't matter. It didn't matter that there was ointment all over the floor. It didn't matter that there was ointment all in her hair. It didn't matter that all the rest of the disciples were talking behind her back. It doesn't matter if we're in the middle of church service and you feel like you need to come up here and pray, and everybody else back there is going to be murmuring. I don't think they will. But you're worried about what people's going to say. Don't worry about them. Mary didn't. Mary didn't worry about what the disciples said. It never fazed her in the scripture where it said, I wonder, when they were contemplating what was going on, she never said, I did it because of this. She never gave an explanation because she was humble. She got to a place where it didn't matter what other people said, what other people thought. It didn't matter at that moment to her. What mattered was she needed a blessing more than anything. She needed something. She knew that that moment, that woman was more precious to her to give it to God than it was for her to ever hold on to it. We don't get the story because it didn't happen this way, but say Mary and Martha was in the house one day and they left that ointment there. And 20 years from now they come down there and it's like, this is where I'm at. But I wish I'd have gave it to Jesus. I wish I'd have got to know Him a little better. I guess I wish I'd have done this a little better. So don't be like Judas and let the things that the devil entices you to be and wants you to be in front of, but instead be a true worship. See the worth in your box. See what God really wants you to do. And I hope this helped somebody today. It helped me when I was studying. I want to get out of my box. I'm not saying that you got, like I said, run the aisles and get in a place, but you can get out of your box and your comfort zone at home. You can do it when in a place where nobody knows it. And you can get a blessing. Because that's where Mary was at. She did it in her own home. And I'm not saying it's got to be this grand and wonderful gesture. But when we realize how much our box is really worth to God, we'll start breaking them. We'll have an experience.